Mike Montgomery, Executive Director of Cal Innovates. Mike, could WCIT destroy the Internet?
It absolutely could. There are a series of meetings that will take place, but the first one taking place on December 3rd in Dubai will generally set the course for what happens in the future. So there is a distinct chance that this tinkering could severely screw up what we've already got.
Give me an example of how it could really screw it up. What's the worst thing that could happen?
There are actually two things. There's the fact that nobody has this potential taxation built into their business models if they want to do international business. And secondly, there's censorship. So people having the freedom of speech on the internet could be taken away from them on an international level.
So Mike, what can TechCrunch viewers do? How do we fight WCIT?
Well, right now at this point in time, everybody who has some connection to a lawmaker or regulator internationally needs to reach out and tell them that this is bad for the internet and bad for the ecosystem.
Mike Montgomery, Executive Director of Cal Innovates, thanks so much for appearing on TechCrunch TV.
Thank you.
Larry Irving, as former Assistant Secretary of Commerce in the Clinton administration, welcome to TechCrunch TV.
Thank you very much.
Larry, could WCIT destroy the Internet?
I don't know that it could destroy it, but it could certainly set it back.
Well, tell me more. How?
It would create obstacles to innovation. It would set up regulatory barriers to the kinds of things we've seen. You know, I come from the Commerce Department. In 1992, there were 1 million people on the internet. Today, there are 2.2 billion people on the internet in 20 years. There's nothing inherently broken, but when you start adding layers and layers of regulation and you start adding costs to companies that want to do work on the internet, that can only slow the pace of innovation and slow the pace of adoption around the world.
But Larry, don't countries like China and Russia already regulate and control their internet? How much different can WCIT make that?
There are a couple of things. One, they have some limited control inside their borders, but an affirmation of censorship and an affirmation of regulation of the internet would be a horrible example for the rest of the world. Most of the world doesn't censor the internet. Most of the world doesn't regulate the internet in the way that's being proposed by some at the ITU. And we don't want to see the China. I don't think there's any rational person who's looking at where the internet is now and where we want to go who would say that we want to adopt a China-Russia model for the global internet.
So Larry, for those people who really care, particularly at TechCrunch, what can they do? We've got the meeting, the WCIT meeting coming up in Doha early in December. What should people do if they really care about maintaining an open internet?
They should let the folks who are appearing at, who are participating at the WCIT know of their concerns about what's happening there. And I think particularly people in the global community, because TechCrunch is a global entity, folks in the global community need to let folks know, what are you doing? Make this open, make it transparent. One of the things we've talked about is, I believe that sunlight sanitizes, and the best way to know what's going on with WCIT is to open up the process to more and more people, let more and more people see what's going on. I think as more people know what's going on, more people object to some of the proposals that are being made. The ITU serves a lot of good functions, but regulating the internet would not be a good service to the world.
Is the ITU vulnerable to public criticism, public opinion? Does it care what people think?
I think that the member states and the representatives at the ITU meeting certainly care, and I certainly do think that the ITU is a responsible organization. They're responding to requests from their members. They need to know that their members are not necessarily representing a global view of what needs to go on with the internet.
Larry Irving, one of the original guys who got the internet, someone who advised President Clinton very early on about what policies should and shouldn't impact the internet. Thanks so much for appearing on TechCrunch TV.
Thank you so much for having me.
Ambassador David Gross, one of America's foremost experts on technology and the impact of technology on the international community. Welcome to TechCrunch TV.
Well, thank you very much. It's great to be back with you.
So David, you're going to be in Dubai, not Doha, early next month, dealing with WCIT. Are you going to be throwing some bombs? Are you going to be saving the internet? Is that what this whole thing's about?
Well, the good news is, unlike for the previous 8 years or so when I had to lead the U.S. delegation to these meetings, and now I'm just a proud member of the delegation. I'll leave the leadership to the new generation. But having said that, I'll certainly be there very actively supporting the U.S. position on the WCIT, the World Conference on International Telecommunications, and our views about what should and should not be included in that very important treaty.
So could WCIT really kill the internet as we know it? Is it that dangerous?
Well, I don't think anything was going to kill the internet. I certainly don't think so, and I certainly don't think that this treaty conference, where everyone actually has a major stake in its success, is likely to do that. But that doesn't mean that there aren't some very serious policy disagreements, and by policy I mean legal as well, disagreements amongst governments and others as to what the role of the international community should be, what the role of the ITU, the International Telecommunications Union, a part of the UN that is an intergovernmental organization. Those are serious policy questions that will be dealt with, at least in part, at the upcoming conference.
David, countries like Russia and China already pretty much control what goes on the internet within their borders. So what's the big deal about WCIT?
Well, the WCIT issues are first and foremost about revising a telecommunications treaty that was negotiated back in 1988, and I think virtually everyone agrees that the world has changed dramatically since 1988, and therefore the treaty is worthy of being updated. That's not, however, to say that the treaty should delve and give the ITU jurisdiction over internet-related issues. Having said that, you're certainly right that within each country, their governments have sovereign rights about a variety of things, including things about the internet, for good or for bad. The issue that people address in international organizations like the ITU and elsewhere is whether or not some of the bad things should be to be legitimized by international agreements, and whether or not there should be restrictions placed or, on the other hand, advantages given to the free flow of information across borders.
David, what's the worst thing that could happen? What could come out of WCIT? Would it be the replacement of ICANN by national sovereign governments like Russia?
I don't think that those types of outcomes are likely, and certainly I think there are some technical reasons why that is particularly unlikely to occur. Having said that, I think probably the worst outcome is likely to be, or could be, would be a failed conference. I think that would be in no country's interest. I think it's important for us to find the appropriate policy-based and principle-based common ground where we are able to convince others about their stake in a free and open internet, that there is in fact benefits for all of trying to keep the internet from being regulated by intergovernmental organizations and the like, whether it's the ITU or others.
Finally, David, for our viewers, people who really care about maintaining an open internet in a global context, what can they do before Dubai? How can they pressure the powers that be?
Well, first of all, I've been very pleased that a number of governments around the world are starting to open up their delegations to include non-government officials. India, for example, recently announced that they will have members of civil society and the private sector on their delegation, as we do in the United States and many other governments have done. And we encourage those people who are able to participate directly on their government delegations. But for those who cannot, certainly they can make their views known to their national governments, both the importance of these issues, but also their views about what their governments ought to do. This is not something that should be restricted only to the interests of a few, but because it impacts so many, potentially, they can make their views known loudly, clearly, and to their governments.
David Gross, one of the few who will be carrying the US flag to Dubai next month. Thank you so much for appearing on TechCrunch TV, and I hope, David, you'll come back later in December or early next year to talk about how WCIT actually turned out.
It'd be my pleasure. Thank you very much.